It's a pleasure to be with you, Judy. It's wonderful. You've written a great book, The
Oh,
White
thank you.
Flag.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
I reread it and it's just beautiful.
You did.
It's
Okay.
compassionate. I think it's helpful for families. I think it's helpful for those who suffer from abuse, substance use disorder.
Mhm.
And I'm so curious, how was it for you while you were writing the book? What made you do it? What motivated you? It's a long stretch to write a book, so
Yeah, it
what
was,
made you do it?
it did take me quite a while, like 3 years.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know if I was going to write it. I have to say, I started to collect evidence, is what I usually do, put together as
Mhm.
much information as I have. And
I
so
can tell because it's so researched, it's so helpful, it's full of resources. It's great.
Well, I started putting together the information I had about Cheryl
Mhm.
and her journal and our letters that we wrote to each other while she was in prison,
Mhm.
um, and her medical report that I got hold of from the
Mhm.
hospital, her cell phone, which was an enormous help because
Mhm.
I could go into her text messages and see, you know, actually the discrepancy between what she said and what she did.
Oh, I see.
And that was helpful, but it
Mhm.
also opened up more and more questions for me.
Mhm.
So that's when I started to read, more books about substance use disorder
Mhm.
and the origins of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think everybody who has somebody, a loved one who has substance use disorder or who has lost them,
Mhm.
has the same questions. They want to
Mhm.
know, how did
Mhm.
this happen?
Mhm.
Why did they start using drugs? Why couldn't they stop when you know that they wanted to?
Mhm.
Why did so and so's son or daughter recover and
Mhm.
mine couldn't?
Mhm.
What happened?
Yeah.
And so the reading that I did was very helpful in understanding brain chemistry, and
Mhm.
in my case, transgenerational trauma,
Trauma, absolutely,
and how
absolutely.
that
It's
had something to do with it.
yeah, it brings it so much home because there was so much suffering in your family just before you were born, and which
Right,
affected your sister, Linda, and
right.
therefore affected her daughter, Cheryl. And
And
about
so it's sort of that white flag is really a continuation from Replacement Child, my first
yes,
book.
yes.
In that, that book was about my family, my immediate family, and the plane crash
Mhm.
that crashed into our house and killed
Right.
one sister and badly injured my other sister,
Mhm.
who is Cheryl's mother.
Yes.
And so there was no way that Cheryl was, unscathed from
Mm.
that trauma that her mother
Mm.
went through her whole life
True,
with,
true. Yeah.
surgeries and actually, being rejected and that type
Mm.
of um, trauma as well.
So, and I think apart from helping people who lose people for some time or forever to substance use disorder, drug use, it's a very helpful book for anybody suffering from transgenerational trauma because I think it must have been hard for you to write the book
It
because
was.
you went through all these emotions. And yet, I think as a professional, I would think that unless we go through the emotions, they will be passed on. The next one down the line will have to grapple with the emotions. So I think you did a great service to yourself, to your family, to your own descendants, maybe to Cheryl's sister as well, in working it through because
And
it's
I hope so. I
it's
hope that's the
working it
case.
through. I can tell from reading it that you were not shying away from the grief and the pain. And I think that
And
that's such a
it's good to hear a professional say that. I'm not,
yeah,
as you know, I'm not a professional. And I was, just trying to put the pieces together.
yeah.
That was what I was really trying to
But what
do.
I'm trying to elicit from you is how how was it going through the emotions? How
It was very difficult, especially since I was really in the midst of grief for my
ah,
niece.
right.
She had just passed away at the beginning of 2017.
Yes.
And so that's when I started putting things together, writing things down, starting to put together my thoughts and why I would do this,
Mhm.
why go through this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Why would I do this?
What?
And it was to find answers. I think it's starting out with,
Mm.
I need to find some answers because it made
Mhm.
no sense to me.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
knew her as, you know, this warm and funny and, always reading books um
Mm.
and I knew from talking to her that she wanted to recover.
Mm.
I knew she wanted to, and she made strides to do that. There
Mm.
were,
Yes.
concrete things that she
Yes.
did.
Yes.
And so it was hard for me to understand what happened.
Mhm.
And finding some answers does give you some comfort to,
Did you
understand what
did you
happened.
think that your niece did grieve? Because I think that both your own mother, so Cheryl's grandmother, and the mother of Cheryl, Linda, your sister,
Mhm.
it's a difficult thing when so much grief builds up. And I wonder whether Cheryl ever made the connection between her feeling she had to self-medicate, how you describe it, and how childhood trauma is such a driver in drug abuse cases, whether
Yeah.
she made the connection with the grief and whether
I
she
don't think
could.
she did.
She
I
didn't.
don't think she ever did.
Yeah.
And that's, one of the reasons that I think, as I say, the title of the book, White Flag, is
Mm.
she never came to that
Yeah.
white flag of surrendering to
That's
what
true.
was really going on
Right.
because she had no information
Mm.
about it. She
Mm.
didn't have the help. And I don't think that people can come to it without the help to
Yes.
find to find the real deep reasons. And
Yeah.
I know there's now, dual diagnosis that
Yes.
is used
Yes.
for substance use
Yes.
disorder.
Thank God.
And I don't think she ever had
The
that was
option.
not available to her,
Right.
which is one of the big problems with our prison system is that the real help is not
Mm.
available.
Mm. Mm.
Um, Often it's not,
Mm.
there's not medically assisted
Mm.
treatment, there's
Mm.
not counseling, which are the two things
No,
that that
that's
help
very
people,
sad.
that help
It's
people.
making you feel powerless and desperate. But there is something about White Flag which has really intrigued me because on the one hand, it's surrender. It's surrender to grief. It's surrender to emotions that may be difficult.
Right.
But unless we do them, we simply shove them down the line. Somebody in the family will pick up and have to carry that load. But it
Right.
has a second significance, as you explained so well. One is to surrender, of course, and the other one is to help. That you're describing how the white flag sign is sort of put up when an institution is willing to take in people
Right.
and
Right.
to help them, and I think that is a beautiful use of the word for your title. It's so adapted because your book does help.
And
You
I
open the book and you find help in it.
well, that's very good to hear.
Mm.
That's very, because that's my purpose,
Yeah.
is to give people some understanding,
Yeah.
which I think does help.
Mm.
And also to maybe take away some of the stigma
That's
that
so
that
true.
there is for people with substance use disorder. And
Mhm.
I think the stigma is part of the larger problem,
Mm.
because if you feel someone is unworthy of help, you don't help them.
Mm. Mm.
And it's very hard to separate out the actions
Mm.
of someone who's addicted with who they are,
Mm.
and just to remember that,
Mhm.
this is still the same person that you love.
Mhm. Yes, yes, and you love
Right.
Cheryl. You still do, and you
Yeah.
did,
It's
and
still the
her
same
mom did.
person,
Yes,
no
yes,
matter, what
true.
this is forcing them to do
Yeah,
and how hard it is for them.
yeah.
The metaphor that always comes to my mind is someone's careening down a hill in a car and they're putting their foot on the brake, but the brake doesn't work.
Yeah, then
And
what
that
you
that
do
always makes
exactly.
me
That's
understand,
a good
that
metaphor. Yes.
they want to
Mhm,
stop.
mhm. And
And
that's
there's
so
just
great.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's great. I think in your book because you have that humane approach, that compassionate approach that comes through, and I really I think people will really love it and feel a relief, because there is this powerlessness. On one hand, there's a powerlessness, and I think
Mhm.
judging people and not giving enough help is maybe also a function of that feeling of powerlessness. If people knew what to do,
Mhm.
maybe there would be less stigma. I think stigma could be part of a defense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, it's also an approach that has been taken for years, which is, let people hit rock bottom, don't help them,
Yes.
kick them
Right.
out of the house. And that doesn't work. Just
No.
doesn't
No.
work, because
No.
rock bottom is usually death
Well, it can
or
be.
prison
It
or
could.
prison
Well, it could be an institution before, where
or an
they are
institution.
really
Right. Right.
weaned off the drug and given substitutes and being
Right.
accompanied. I've worked with some
Mm.
people who did, take that
Yeah.
route, and it is possible.
Yeah.
But I think you're calling, you're doing an SOS with your book. So I think you're showing where more needs to be done. So
And
that's.
I think the real thing is to treat these people that have addiction, treat them as if they have
Mhm.
diabetes,
Yes,
you
true,
know,
true,
and
true.
find the solutions in
Mm,
that way.
mm, mm.
Not to be shunned and kept away, and
Yeah.
but treated as people.
Mhm.
Just treated it
True,
humanely
true,
as people,
true, true. That's true.
not
And
arrested.
and to
That's
understand that suffering can bring people to that as a way out, as a supposedly way out, even
yeah,
though it isn't. It's a way down. But I think
yeah.
it's having to deal with suffering and to deal with your emotions, and that's where we need help, collectively and individually and in the family, I think.
And as far as family dynamic, there, I really feel that silence in a family is also another trauma.
This is the biggest, I think it is a great takeaway in your book. Silence and the transmission of transgenerational
Mm,
trauma. It's almost as if it's the train that will crash.
mhm.
Silence is not good.
No,
Silence is,
it's not.
and you show that. You show that. How how do you think? In what way did Cheryl carry some of that silence around the suffering of her mother and her grandmother, and maybe even you? And how do you think that,
Well,
where
I
do you
think it's
see the
very hard to go
symptoms?
on pretending that everything is fine when
That's
it's
so
not.
true.
And
Yes.
it takes a lot of energy to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And I know in Cheryl's case, it did materialize as depression,
Mhm.
and she wasn't diagnosed with that until much later, as far as I know.
But it's already
Um,
once down the line, isn't it? Because there
Already
was
once
so
down
much
the line.
pretending that the
Right,
scars, burned from the plane crash,
right,
weren't there, weren't
right.
important, weren't. There was a lot of what you're just saying, of
Yeah,
that pretending it's normal and life will go
right.
on, and yes,
Mm,
it does. I mean, it's a very fine
mm.
line,
Really
yes,
is.
it does.
Really is. And I
But
can't blame
no,
my parents for,
no,
instilling that in my sister, Cheryl's mother,
true.
that, she's fine. You're
Mhm.
fine. You can
Yes,
do anything.
yes,
Everything is
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
And that wasn't really the case. She didn't have
No, it
the
wasn't.
help to
No,
herself. She didn't have the help to deal with what she
no.
was confronting.
Mhm.
And, even after, the physical part of, surgery after surgery was over,
True.
there was the social
Yeah,
part
yeah,
that was not dealt with.
yeah. And
And
that's the
so,
mother. That's the mother that Cheryl had, and
right.
unconsciously, I think the mother of Cheryl was carried by Cheryl. Cheryl
Mm,
uh,
yeah.
somehow wanted to make her happy, had
Oh,
taken
yeah.
that onto herself.
Right.
So
Right.
that's really, really a very important lesson for all of us, I think, to learn.
I agree. I
Mm,
agree.
yeah,
And also, because it's a memoir, it has to deal with my feelings
right.
and, my experience with all of this,
Yes.
which is very much the same.
Mm,
I feel very grateful that I don't have that addictive part to my
mm,
personality,
yeah,
but it could have been different if I
true.
hadn't found other things in my life.
Mhm,
It
mm,
certainly could have been different.
yeah.
Um, and so, it's a fine line,
Mm,
as you say,
mm,
of,
mm,
where you end up.
mm.
Where do you end up?
What happened for you in the process of writing? 3 years is a long time,
Mm,
even longer, I think almost.
mm,
It started in
yeah.
2017 when you collected. So what was the process of looking into the suffering, looking into the guilt? You say, I have guilt, I have
Mhm.
powerlessness, I see the shame, I see the stigma, I see the grieving to be done. How did you come out of it after
I
the
think,
years?
in understanding more and knowing how complex this problem is,
Mhm,
it lessened my own feelings of guilt over not being able to
mhm.
save her,
Yes.
really. And
Yes.
that was the crux of it. Why couldn't
Mhm.
I always felt like,
Yeah.
especially in my family, I was the fixer.
Mhm.
I could make this better, I could do this and,
Mm.
solve this problem and solve that problem. And I couldn't.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
obviously couldn't.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so dealing with that guilt,
Mm.
um, knowing how far out of my range it really was.
And and
Was almost a relief.
and the echo is almost with me of your mother not having been able to save Donna,
Oh, right.
whom you
That's
replaced.
right.
Can you hear it? I mean, it's just, not being
Right.
able to save
Yep.
that, and
Which
not
she
being
always
able to
felt.
save Cheryl, and not to be able to save Linda from her burns. It's
Yeah.
it's it's
Yeah.
that powerlessness that, and I just get shivers.
Yeah.
The thing is that if we really squarely face that powerlessness, then we get a foundation on which to stand.
Mm. Oh,
I think,
that's
yeah, yeah,
very insightful.
yeah.
Very
It
insightful.
was so interesting because I flashed on one of the lines you had. She's still mine.
Mm.
She's still mine. And I thought that that
Right.
also was a sort of echo for me down 3 generations
Right.
of
Right.
that.
And that also goes to, not forgetting who
Yes,
these people are
yes, yes,
in your
that's
life,
true. Yes,
and
yes,
trying to take
yes,
away that stigma and, you
yeah,
know, helping them while you have to protect yourself too, because they will lie and cheat and steal.
yeah.
So you have to also protect yourself, but with the eye to, they're mine.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
mine. They're still
yes,
mine.
yeah. They're still yours. They're still in your heart, and you're
Yeah.
with her soul still, and
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
there's also the sister, I think, of
Yep.
hers,
And we've
and
gotten much closer
yeah,
especially in the
because
last
in
few.
a sense she's almost a replacement child now for her
Sure.
sister.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes, so it's
So I'm trying to make sure those
mhm,
avenues are open.
yeah,
The
yeah,
communication is
yeah.
open too.
I
So,
hope you will have great success with the book, Judy. It's a
well,
great
thank
job
you.
you've done, and I think it's poetic.
Thank you.
It's not just another book on drug abuse. It's much bigger. It's an insight into the human soul, and you show your love. Your love is coming through the pages, and I hope
Oh,
that
thank
a
you.
lot of people who need to find your book. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you
you
so
should
much
know
for
very
saying that.
well. You're
Thank you.
welcome. Yeah,
Thanks for
it's
having me
yes.
on,
You're absolutely
talking to me
welcome.
like, we always do.
That's
So,
true. Yeah, all
it's a
all the
pleasure.
best. And I don't know whether you still have a question you want to ask me. Maybe there's something that
No,
came up.
you've given me more insights into, my
Ah!
writing than I had.
No, you
So,
have so many
thank
insights.
you.
Did Linda's feeling unworthy filter down to her daughter, and so much, concern that there was in the family with what had happened, but that working through that needed to be done. And in a sense, it's now being done. So it's an accomplishment.
I
It's
think so.
really,
I think so,
it's,
and I hope it does reach out to others that
yes,
are in the
yes.
same
I am,
situation.
I am certain. I'm certain.
Yeah.
I think it will make its way into the community of those people who are also willing to face it.
Right.
And they
Right.
were making a difference, not just for themselves and their family, but I think for society as a
Mm,
whole. It's a great contribution.
that is hope.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome, Judy. Excellent. Good luck to you
Thank you.
and White Flag out there to fly high.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye-bye.